Before the story begins, I'd like to ask you to subscribe and like. This will help the channel grow. The Canvas of Secrets, a detective mystery story. Detective Nora Blake had grown accustomed to oddities, forged passports, lovers' quarrels that turned to violence, petty thefts dressed up as grand heists. A masterpiece? That should have been for art detectives or insurance men. But when the call came from the stately townhouse on Pembroke Row, Nora felt the same stitch of unease that usually preceded trouble. Sir Jonathan Hale, collector, patron, a man whose name hung on museums, had purchased a little-known painting at a private sale 3 weeks earlier, a moody canvas attributed to an obscure Baroque itinerant. It was small, unassuming, and had arrived in a plain oak frame. He had hung it in his drawing room, meant as a quiet contrast to the gilt and bravado of the rest of his collection. Tonight, the drawing room was a chaos of velvet ropes and tapping shoes. The painting had been taken in the night. Not cut from the wall, not smashed and slid away, gone. But Nora's eyes didn't settle on the empty space alone. Against the piano, a smear of fine orange dust trailed to the French doors. On the side table, a single crushed cigarette but smoldered in its ashtray, the brand imported and rare in their city. She questioned the house staff, an earnest housekeeper who'd found the empty frame at dawn, a night guard who swore he had checked alarms, and Sir Jonathan himself, pale and precise, more affronted than frightened. "It's the frame," he said. "They've taken the canvas whole. But why leave the frame? Why leave the nails and the dust? Someone wanted us to know this was intentional." Nora's fingers found the frame's back, intact, light, but oddly warm as if it had been handled recently. The courier's note from the private sale lay on Sir Jonathan's desk, stamped with an old crest and a barely legible signature. She'd seen such crests in old archives, and they never led to simple thieves. That night, in the hallway, a cleaning woman whispered that Sir Jonathan had been oddly agitated for days. He kept asking about the painting's back. Said he felt something watching him when he stood in front of it. Nora filed the whisper away. Collectors often smothered rumors with expense, sometimes that made them targets. Before leaving, she ran her glove along the inner lip of the empty frame and felt a nick, tiny, precise, the evidence of some tool. Someone had worked from the reverse. And as she stared at the empty space on the wall, a thought slid into place that felt colder than the night. What if the canvas had been removed not just for art, but because something was hidden behind it? Nora didn't sleep. The tiniest details often birth the largest truths. Back at the station, she ordered a full inventory of the room and the painting's provenance. The private sales docket was odd. A quick exchange, an untraceable broker, a payment moved through 3 shell accounts. The painting itself had minimal history in the catalogs, just a mention in a 19th century dealer's ledger. The forensics report returned with a single, startling line: faint traces of chalk dust, a compound used by archaeological restorers, the kind employed when unframing works to examine backboards. Whoever had removed the canvas had known restoration techniques. This was no smash and grab. This was meticulous. At dawn, Nora visited Sir Jonathan's study again. With the family still shaken, she asked to see storage, specifically the place where the courier had kept the crate. The curator led her to a climate-controlled room where the crate had been opened. Inside, behind a padded lining, lay a scrap of linen with charcoal marks. Under ultraviolet, faded ink bled through. Tiny, cramped script in a language Nora recognized from the university seminars she used to audit, an archaic dialect of Catalan mixed with schematic lines, drawing, unmistakably, a map. She took the linen to Dr. Anna Varela, a conservator who whispered as she worked. "This is not a signature," Anna said, voice low. "It's a map, but not for a road. It's for an underground plan, arches, pillars, chambers. Someone used the back of the canvas as cartographic paper. Nora felt her chest tighten. Catacombs were not myth in this city. Beneath the old quarter lay cobbled tunnels and collapsed crypts that swallowed victims who stepped wrong. An old map bound to a painting could be worth more than the masterpiece itself. The painting had been purchased, it seemed, precisely because of what was scribbled behind it. That afternoon, a neighbor mentioned a man in a gray coat lingering near the sale house on Pembroke Row the week prior, photographed by a civic security camera. When Nora requested the footage, faces blurred by grain resolved into a profile she'd seen before, a scholar's jaw, not a thief's furtive glance, eyes too steady to be a common criminal. Someone with knowledge, someone who could read the map. In the quiet of her car, Nora turned the questions over. Who would buy a painting to retrieve a map? Who would steal it back? If the map led to catacombs, what would be hidden there? Treasure, yes, but also secrets long meant to be entombed. She pinned the linen on her board beside the courier's docket and the curator's notes. The letters on the map resembled a street name she recognized from an old fire insurance plan. Her fingertip hovered above it. The map's lines seemed to breathe in the dim light. The chase wasn't about canvas theft anymore. It was about something older, and someone willing to unframe history to find it. The man on the grainy footage had a name, Mateo Rojas, a quiet art historian who had recently written a controversial paper about hidden cartography in Baroque frames. He'd vanished from university panels months ago, retreating into private study. When Nora found him, he wasn't surprised to see her. "I did not take it," he said immediately. "I only cataloged the frame. The owner, he had asked me about old binding methods. I told him what I knew, and then I refused." His hands trembled as he spoke. "Someone offered me a chance to see the map properly. I refused." They took the painting while Jonathan celebrated it at a dinner. Nora watched him. Scholars tended to defend texts as if they were children. Their loyalties were strange and fierce. "Who approached you?" she asked. Mateo's eyes went distant. "A woman." She said the map belonged to her lineage. She called herself a guardian, Ana de Villegas. She claimed her family hid documents underground when the city ransacked the monastery centuries ago. She wanted the painting returned to where it belonged. When I refused, she said the right people would make it happen. A name like a bell. Villegas, an old family in the city with ties to convents and charity endowments. Nora knew their crest, a small key crossed with a lily. She also knew their tendency, patronage that turned to entitlement. Could a line of descendants claim a map as family property? Could they hire thieves to reclaim a painted secret? Later that day, Forensic returned with another curiosity. Under adhesive fragments on the frame's back, traces of iron filings collected in a pattern. Someone had used a compass and a tiny awl to transfer positions, drafting a map of arches and vents. This was precise work, years of craft. You did not sketch catacombs without knowledge. At dusk, Nora trawled the old monastery plans in the municipal archive. The map's angles matched a forgotten choir vault, and an access hatch sealed in 1792. A corridor that today's city planners had built a public garden above. If the map was true, the catacomb openings lay under the municipal lawn, an unlikely place to hide centuries-old treasure, and yet perfect. The city walked above, never looking down. She asked herself, who would kill to secure an underground trove? The Louvre and the private collectors? Or a guardian who wanted family secrets to remain buried? Someone was willing to steal the painting to keep a map secret. Someone else wanted it retrieved. There were reasons beyond greed for blood. Before midnight, Nora returned to Sir Jonathan's house. In the darkness of the drawing room, she held the empty frame like a question. Around the town, shutters closed. Somewhere, under the city, the entrances awaited. She felt the map's lines as if they hummed beneath the floorboards, toward a place that had been sleeping too long. Nora went at midnight, alone save for the bookmarked plans in her satchel and a flashlight whose beam cut through the municipal garden's clipped hedges. The park was deserted. The moon lay low and pale, like a coin caught in cobwebs. She found the hatch behind a granite bench disguised as paving. The iron ring was old but not eroded, recently moved. With gloved hands she worked the bolt. It gave under pressure, and a smell of earth exhaled, damp and ancient. The ladder descended into a shaft like the throat of a living thing. Below, the city's bones shifted, vaulted chambers, tiled alcoves, pilasters eaten by time. The map had been precise. The drawn lines led her to a brick niche behind a collapsed pillar. Nora pried at mortar that barely held, and behind it, a metal chest lay curled in dust like a sleeping animal. She found no golden reliquary. Instead, the chest held ledgers bound in oilskin, a small iron key wrapped in oilcloth, and a roll of brittle parchment sealed with wax and printed by a lily and key. The ledger's first page bore a list of names, patrons and donors, merchants and soldiers, entries with dates and notations about, safes below, and gifts to be used when the crisis comes. The parchment, carefully unrolled, contained coordinates and an inventory, more than treasure, records of allegiances, payments, and blood debts matching the city's oldest families. A noise scraped above. Footsteps in the park, a shadow on the hatch cover. Nora felt breath catch. She had triggered nothing. These were ordinary footsteps. She slipped the chest into her bag and climbed. At the surface, a figure stood with a torch. Ana de Villegas. "Inspector," Ana said with no surprise. "You are always faster than the rest." Nora's pulse quickened. "These are public records that should be in the archive," she said. "You can't just hide history when it implicates folk who still hold power." Anna's eyes were cold and beautifully steady. "We do not hide history. We choose who remembers. The ledger names men who stole from our convents, men who took vows and then broke them. The city will burn if those names are read aloud," Nora answered. "So you sent thieves to reclaim a painting?" Anna's expression did not change. "We asked that the painting be returned. It was never intended for a museum case. It was a map, and maps are not for sale." From the hedgerow, a flicker, torchlight multiplied by dozens. Lanterns bobbed into the park, Villegas supporters, perhaps, or hired men. The municipal lawn's green was suddenly a stage, and Nora a performer with no script. Someone had been watching the hatch. The question was worse than the answer. Who would read those names and act on them? Nora realized that some truths did more than hurt reputations. They could topple fortunes. The city above hummed with quiet violence she had not known could simmer so close to surface. She turned to Ana and said quietly, "We take these to the archive. The public has a right to know." Ana smiled as if at a joke. "Do you, detective? Public truth can scorch the innocent. Or the guilty. Which will you choose?" Before Nora could answer, a rifle barked. The men in the hedges advanced. The choice would be forced upon them. Gunshots tore through the clipped hedges. Nora dove, bag slamming into sod, as men in hoods spilled into the lawn. The fight was sudden, raw, hands grasping, brass clanging. She returned fire once, then again as more figures crowded round. Ana moved like a conductor, directing a dozen faces that Nora realized were not merely hired thugs, but descendants of lineages whose wealth drained from the ledgers. "You don't know what you hold," Ana shouted over the commotion. "This ledger names men who slept with enemies and woke to crowns. Expose them, and you set a fuse." Nora had a choice. Scatter the ledger to the wind or secure it for the public archive. She shouted for backup, her radio swallowed by static. The park's lamps swung in a halo as reinforcements arrived, but so did more figures aligned with Villegas. A man in a dark coat. Mateo's face flashed in her memory. Was he with them, or had he been used as a pawn? In the burst of chaos, the chest slipped from Nora's shoulder and burst open. Pages spilled like confetti, names fanning into the grass. One of the masked men snatched a sheet, then tore it. Another snatched the iron key. Someone else grabbed the parchment. Nora lunged after the latter and found it in the hands of a silhouette whose voice she recognized, Sir Jonathan Hale. His face, pale and controlled, looked smaller in the lamplight. "You?" she murmured, breathless. Hale did not speak. Instead he pressed the parchment and the key into a leather satchel and turned away, eyes glassy. "I had to know," he said, like confession or defense. "If they have those names, my foundation, my name." His voice broke. The riot dwindled into a crooked truce when the squad cars arrived. Men dispersed into alleys and hedgerows like shaken crows. Anna and her group faded into the dark with coordinated grace. Sir Jonathan was escorted to the station as a witness, though his hands trembled like a man who had been caught in a moral gust. At the station, Nora unrolled what remained, fragments of ledger, a torn piece of parchment, and the iron key that glinted with old promises. She taped what she could, reconstructing names stitched with decades of debt. Her captain entered, eyes tired. "You know what this means?" he asked. "This ledger's a political bomb." Nora thought of Anna's words. "Choose who remembers." She weighed the ledger in her hands, its pages like tinder. If published, those names would topple dynasties. If kept secret, the city would sleep on rotten ground. She looked at the iron key and felt the weight of decision settle like iron on her palm. History demanded to be told, but history also bled. Dawn arrived like soft treason. The ledger's torn fragments lay catalogued under evidence lights. The captain convened politicians, archivists, and 2 representative journalists who promised discretion. Nora watched the meeting as if it were a lung about to exhale. Publicizing the ledger would be to set fire to reputations. Hiding it was to let rot fester. They crafted a third way, selected publication of non-damaging material, redacting names that could cause violence, while the rest would be sealed under court order until formal investigations could proceed. It was compromised by committee, bureaucracy's attempt to calm a city heart. But someone had other plans. That night, Sir Jonathan's townhouse burned. Not the whole house, but the archive wing. Papers charred but not entirely consumed, and the oak frame of the removed painting recovered from a hidden alcove in the study. Under the frame, a fresh scrap lay, a note typed in a hand Nora knew now too well. "You thought you could choose for everyone, but history chooses its readers." They found Sir Jonathan in the yard, alive but staring hollow, clutching the leather satchel. The parchment and the iron key within were singed but intact. He mumbled that an emissary had come promising to protect his name if he handed over the key. He had handed it over. The frame, he said, had been a decoy. The real map had been painted over in the 1800s and hidden in layers of horsehair and oil. Someone in his family had hidden the true instruction elsewhere. Nora understood then that the painting was never merely map-carrying. It was a lie-maker, a decoy to mislead the greedy. The true map had been transposed by someone who feared exposure, someone close to the ledger's creation. She put the iron key into evidence and burned the remaining paperwork behind locked doors. Anna slipped from sight, as did many of the families named. Mateo resurfaced to testify about textual manipulation. Sir Jonathan faced indictments for withholding documents, though his reputation and libraries shielded him largely. Months later, Nora stood again before the empty frame in the drawing room of a quieter Hale. The painting itself had been recovered in a foreign gallery after a tip-off. An old woman in a Naples market recognized it and traced it back. It had been washed, rewoven, and the map beneath was found to be not only a map but a warning. Coordinates leading to a sealed crypt filled not with gold, but with ledger books, sealed letters, and a last testament of a convent sister whose name began with V. Those documents told a story of abuse and protection, of women who sewed secrets into art to save lives. The ledger had not been treasure so much as truth, brutal, corrective, and dangerous. The city's foundations shifted as names were read, investigations launched, and families sued. Nora shelved the case as open but managed, and took one last private look at the frame. In the quiet, she slid her fingers into the notch where someone had pried the back. Under the lip she found an old, tiny keyhole, useless now, its purpose fulfilled by the chaos it had released. As she left, she felt a small relief and a small fear. The map had done what maps do. It had directed men, women, and the city toward a point of reckoning. Whether the reckoning would heal or wound would depend on who learned to read without setting fire.